Well, hello everybody. This is Mike Savage. I'm from Instructional Concepts, and today I have a recorded webinar for everybody today. This webinar is titled, as you can see on the screen. Oh, actually, I should probably share my screen. Oh, I think I am. Sorry about that. Yes, it's called A Sensible Approach to Teaching the Science of Reading. And of course, I am Mike Savage, and I am the founder of a group called Instructional Concepts. Our name is Instructional Concepts, and we are partnering with Colorado State University Pueblo in their teacher education department. To give you a little background about who I am and how this webinar came to be, well, I'm Mike, founded Instructional Concepts. I'll jump to the middle of this slide. What we do is we offer graduate level courses for teachers to pursue master's degrees or possibly even graduate level credits, CEUs, those types of things. Our graduate level courses are fully accredited through Colorado State University Pueblo's teacher education program that are at graduate levels. So typically teachers are taking courses through us at Instructional Concepts who, to be very blunt, are very interested in moving up their step and lane structures in their school districts in which they work. Some take them just for the educational opportunity, but by and large, most of our students are using these credits to move up for steps and lanes. We find that we are one of the more affordable, if not the most affordable group out there. We are adding more courses figuratively as we speak. We're continuing to grow as we get more and more students joining us. To get the word out, we are offering these free webinars, which you're watching a recording of one of them today. This is actual content that comes from the course itself. The courses, if you sign up for a grad course through us at Instructional Concepts, it's self-learning, so there really is no Google Meets to jump on. You basically sign up for the course through our website. We send you a link to get properly registered with the university. All that's free. The only cost is the tuition of the course, which is posted on our website at www.instructionalconcepts.net. Once you register, I immediately send you the resources that you need, which is typically a textbook and a syllabus. And you just start working through the modules that are posted in the syllabus, sending me work as you go. Giving you some feedback as you submit your work. Most students are getting work done in some as soon as several weeks. Some take a full year because it's self-paced. You just take your time and you get it done when you can. At the 1 year point, we check in to see how things are going, but typically most people are done well before that. So if you are interested in taking our courses through Instructional Concepts, feel free to check out our website at www.instructionalconcepts.net, and we'd love to help you out. My name is Mike Savage, and my background, I've been a classroom teacher for 16 years, split in those 16 years between first grade and fifth grade. So elementary background for sure on the primary and the intermediate side too. And then spent 9 years as a school administrator. I'm a fully licensed principal. Was a principal of early childhood, well, an elementary school, 2 elementary schools over those 9 years. And also got the opportunity to oversee early childhood education in Minnesota, which was a really great eye-opening opportunity for me. So lots of experiences with teaching and now offering courses through Instructional Concepts. We hope to hear from you. And then of course, these free webinars will be popping up from time to time. Just continue to check our website, check Facebook. That's typically where we're promoting these events. So one of the things I always like to start with as we get into the content here is before we talk about anything, before we get into anything instructional, we always want to talk about the power of expectations. And one of the things we have found over time as educators, and if you're viewing this and you are experienced, and even if you don't have a ton of experience, you probably have seen the impact of high expectations. And actually, this slide is actually not quite worded the way I'd like it to read. I should change it, but it's, instead of being titled "Grounding the Work in High Expectations," I should title it making sure we don't ground the work in low expectations, if you see what I'm trying to say there. It's just that question of, would anybody in the world, any educator across the country, across the world, would they ever admit that they have low expectations for students? Could you imagine a principal walking through a classroom, a school, walking through to each classroom door, peeking their head in for a moment? Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've just got a question for you, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Jones. Hey, I'm sorry, kids, to bother, but hey, real quick, do you have high expectations for all these students here? There isn't going to be a single teacher that says no to that question. Every single person is going to say, absolutely, I have high expectations for students, every single one of them. But I have found that that's not entirely true. And it's not that we have low expectations on purpose for students. I don't think that's a thing. If that's a thing, if people truly have low expectations for students, then they should probably get out of teaching. But I do believe, because I don't believe there's many people like that, but I do believe a lot of us, and I'm one of them, we accidentally lower expectations for students. It's a subconscious thing. It's something we're not even aware of sometimes. And I contend it has to do with a great character trait that the best of the best teachers have, sympathy and empathy. The best teachers foster amazing relationships with students. They foster outstanding, trusting relationships so that students can take risks in the classroom. But what comes with those relationships is, of course, a heart. The best of us, we pour our lives into this. We want to do the very best we possibly can for our students. And sometimes I have found that that heart and that sympathy can get in the way. For example, a student comes to school with, without getting too specific, because we don't have a ton of time today, but comes with a unique background of maybe trauma, maybe homelessness, maybe living under the poverty line, significant risk factors that could inhibit learning. But if the teacher knows of these things, which they should, there shouldn't be a secret. How often are us educators, I know I've done this, we're just simply satisfied that the kid is behaving themselves, or they're simply satisfied if it's not a behavior student, they're just satisfied that they're there and they're trying, they showed up on time, that they got their homework done, knowing that there was no parent at home last night. And then all of a sudden we're amazed or really taken back by their success. Well, that's an example of having low expectations. Somebody once told me, it was a reading specialist I used to work with. He said, I thought it was masterful way of saying this, that your degree of surprise when a student does something successful is an indication of your low expectations. And then your lack thereof of said surprise is actually an example or an indication of your high expectations. And I just thought that was a really insightful way. So I started asking myself the question, how often was I surprised when a student who came with a background of some sort of trauma or some sort of barrier, perceived barrier, how often in my career was I surprised when they did something successful or did something very well? And I don't know about you guys, but for me, it was a lot. It was a lot. I started my teaching in the north side of Minneapolis in a high impoverished area. And it was a sorry about that. It was a situation where students just really came from some unique backgrounds, and so often I found myself just being surprised when they were doing really great things. I love these kids, I love them immensely, but sometimes found myself surprised, and that's just an example of low expectations. So I think it's about catching ourselves. It's about reminding ourselves and having trusting relationships with our colleagues and having those conversations about, oh man, did I do it again? Yeah, you did it again. And just being honest and vulnerable about it. And the thing is, we're always going to do it. I don't think it's about eliminating low expectations, but I think it's about minimizing them. I think we really got to minimize these low expectations. So whether we're talking about the science of reading that we're going to talk about here, or writing, math, social studies, behavior management, technology in the name it, it's got to be grounded in avoiding low expectations. So into the actual instructional content of this session, those of you who have been through the science of reading, with this webinar, there's an assumption that I'm making here that whoever is viewing this webinar has had some sort of previous experience with the science of reading. And what I have found is the science of reading, a lot of it is based on this Scarborough's reading rope, the idea that skilled reading is weaving in many different strands of literacy. Language comprehension, word recognition are key. All components are equally important to fostering a solid reader. Proficient readers seemingly integrate all these strands together. And so what you see over on the rope there, it's kind of hard to see on this image, but sight recognition, phonemic awareness, decoding, vocabulary, background knowledge, language structures, vocabulary is on there twice, inferencing. These are all things that great readers are constantly doing. Us adults that are teaching, we do this naturally, of course, in our lives. But the science of reading is this idea that, of course, that all of this is happening kind of at the same time. Now, I don't know about you, but when I see something like this in anything, I get overwhelmed by this. Like, okay, how do I teach decoding at the same time as vocabulary? How do I teach sight recognition at the same time as inferencing? And then, my goodness, and I got to ground it in high expectations. And oh my gosh, it gets overwhelming. I'm someone who's going to get overwhelmed very easy. And as a teacher, I just need to take it very simply, and yet honor what the research is saying. And so when I see Scarborough's reading rope, and remembering this, the title of this session is called A Sensible Approach to Teaching the Science of Reading. When I see something like this, I'm saying to myself, wow, that's a lot. That is a lot to take in. How can I take a bite of this and just start to move in the right direction? And this, frankly, without any disrespect to the science of reading, which I really think is a great thing, but this is nothing new. This is something that teachers have been doing for quite some time. And if anyone's on or viewing this webinar that was ever part of Reading First, or even, it was political at the time, but there was some good things in it, the No Child Left Behind Act, Reading First was a big part of that. And Reading First was this idea that was put forth by a group called the National Reading Panel back in the early 2000s. And in the early 2000s, this group came forward with this, the 5 pillars of reading. And basically, the National Reading Panel went around and just started asking the most effective reading educators in the country, what are you doing? And fast forward to 2025, in 2025, what we're saying is they were doing this right here, the 5 pillars of reading. This is what the National Reading Panel was saying people were doing as well. And I think these 5 things are actually a little easier to memorize. They show up in Scarborough's reading rope as well. But phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And just in a way to kind of make this be a little more easier to implement as a busy classroom teacher, it's about doing all of these things kind of in progression with kids, depending on what age they're in. So for example, if you look over at the left, phonemic awareness or phonological awareness, this is the idea of recognizing and manipulating sounds. What are the sounds students are hearing when they read? Phonics is that next step up from phonemic awareness. Okay, now a kid is listening to the sounds, but now they're applying a symbol to the sound, maybe a letter, maybe a digraph, maybe a blend. But it's that symbolization of the sound. So phonemic awareness is the sound, phonics is the symbolic representation of that sound. Okay, so those might kind of come together in the early grades, more so than the late grades. Then as you get going with the phonemic awareness and the phonics, you move into fluency, reading text accurately with proper expression. Then you start to build students' vocabulary by adding in new words that are not just the simple words. And then, of course, comprehension, making sense of everything that students are reading. So again, now even this can be a little overwhelming, I think. And so one of the things that I've always done when it comes to the science of reading is just constantly reminding myself let's say over the course of a week, especially in the youngest of grades. In the older grades, yeah, you're going to have some kids that are still struggling with phonemic awareness or phonics, but you're more focused on the third pillar and up, so fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So K2 teachers, what I'm saying to you guys maybe over the course of the week is, when you look at your reading lessons, are you teaching all 5 of these components with the understanding that phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency, and vocabulary to all kids throughout the course of a week is going to lead to better comprehension. Grade 3 through 5 teachers, what I would maybe say to you, or even older teachers in middle school or high school, what I would say to you is, I would think most of the time, most students when they come to these upper grades are okay on phonemic awareness or phonics, but the fluency and the vocabulary and the comprehension might be at issue. So over the course of the week, how much time are you spending on fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension? And every so often reminding students about phonemic awareness and phonics. And oftentimes in the upper grades, that can come through lessons such as morphology, when we study like Greek and Latin roots and things like that. But anyway, phonemic awareness plus phonics plus fluency plus vocabulary leads to comprehension. Comprehension is the manifestation of when all of these other components are being properly taught to kids. To me, it's a little bit easier to understand. So now all of a sudden in reading, I'm looking at my lessons, I'm looking at what I'm trying to do, and I'm saying to myself, okay, where am I weak? Am I doing some phonemic awareness? When am I weak? Am I doing some phonics? When am I giving kids chances to practice their fluency? When am I teaching them new vocabulary? And if I'm doing this, oh my goodness, look at comprehension there, spelled horrifically wrong. I'm so sorry about that. I'll have to get that fixed. Ultimately, that leads to better comprehension for students. Question that comes up when I talk about this, someone will inevitably ask me, so we never have to teach comprehension explicitly? If I just teach phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, and vocabulary, kids will just comprehend? To a degree, yes, but it's not as simple as that. There are still comprehension explicit activities that you can and should be doing. However, the research does show that the former is true, that when those first 4 strands are effectively explicitly taught to students, all students, remember, grounding it in high expectations, there is a strong correlation to reading comprehension. So oftentimes when we hear research like this, we talk about, okay, how do we put this in a framework that works? How do we put this in a framework that will work for students? And so some school districts use what we used to call RTI, response to intervention, multi-tiered education, multi-tiered student systems, MTSS, these types of pyramid-shaped instructional models come into play. And that first part of, let me see if I have the next slide here. Yeah, this right here, this triangle we see so much in schools here. But the bottom of that triangle, we often call that tier 1 or core instruction. And I'll jump back to this slide over here. I'm on the green bottom of the triangle. But that core instruction is the foundational for all students' reading development. Every student should be getting core instruction. Again, I think this goes back to the conversation about accidentally having low expectations. How often are all students, or even is this even a reality? Do all students receive core instruction on a daily basis, grade level core instruction? I don't know. That's a question you have to ask yourself at your classroom in your district. But what I am confidently sharing with you here is that this should be available to every single student that walks through your classroom door. Every student should be exposed to grade level content. But Mike, What if I just know they're not going to get it? I think I feel I've said more than think. I firmly believe that every student should be exposed to the grade level content. So it's a foundational for all students' reading development. You really, in this time, you emphasize explicit systematic teaching. You know, if you visualize core instruction, it really isn't what the image shows there. Core instruction is more one teacher in front of the whole class, generally providing direct instruction very explicitly, very systematically, where they are making sure that everything that's being taught is one of those 5 strands, one of those 5 pillars: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, or comprehension, and is delivered in the entire classroom setting. So that's what core instruction is. I'll get into some frameworks, some minute by minute recommendations near the end of this here. But that's something to be thinking about as what you are teaching during that core instruction time. Is it to all kids, and is it connecting to each of those 5 pillars? Now, not all 5 pillars every day, but remember what I said earlier, like over the course of a week. So maybe on the first day, it's heavy on the fluency side of things. Then on the second day, maybe it's heavier on the vocabulary or comprehension. So I don't like to view it as a day-to-day sort of thing, but more over the course of a week. Or maybe it makes more sense to be thinking of it over the course of a unit of instruction. But all of those pillars to be provided to students during that core instruction time. So what are you teaching them during core instruction? Well, typically in most school districts, you're going to have some sort of curriculum. Now, I know some districts don't, and it's kind of on the teacher to create this. And so that's an added challenge, I'm not going to lie. So this is more geared toward teachers that have a district adopted curriculum or a school adopted curriculum. You want to follow that. If that's been approved as a district resource, that's been approved by the school board, they report to the parents. That's what's being expected. That's what is being expected. That is what people are expecting is being taught in your classrooms. So follow that, obviously. However, every single lesson in a teacher manual is not the best possible way to teach it. You got to remember these teacher manuals are written by sometimes outstanding educators, and I'm not trying to be problematic here, but sometimes not so much. And so over time, we learn really great strategies that have been introduced to us over time. This is the time to use those things. Follow the scope and sequence. Follow the topics and the objectives and the goals that are set forth by your teacher manual. Now, assuming the teacher manual is aligned to your state standards, yes, but follow that scope and sequence. But use your expertise to fill in gaps that might not necessarily be in the page-by-page lessons. So, for example, what I'm trying to simply say here, might be an overly simplified way to say it, is that if you're teaching a unit on a book, it doesn't even matter what the book is, but think of some sort of book, whether it's a first grade read aloud or a 5th grade chapter book, whatever it might be. And you are studying vocabulary of that book on a particular day or a particular portion of that lesson. You don't have to do it the way the actual teacher manual tells you, but if the manual is saying today's objective is something to do with vocabulary in said book, that's what you got to make sure you're doing. So if you have a better way of teaching vocabulary than what the teacher manual is saying, figuratively, not literally, but figuratively, rip that page out of the teacher manual, follow the scope and sequence, but put your better idea in there and teach it that way. For goodness sakes, we're all educators that have been hired in our school districts. We have an expertise, we have an expectation to do great work for kids. We should be able to use it. So put yourself in that position where you're following the scope and sequence, but you're doing it in ways that are effective for kids, doing it in ways that you have been trained in, that you really like, and frankly, ways that are very comfortable for you. You have to teach in a way that's very comfortable and puts you in a very confident place as an educator. And then near the end of this core instruction, what you want to do is make sure you are introducing something for the student to be able to practice independently, because in the next section here, we're going to talk about targeted instruction. We want to make sure students are doing something that they can do independently during targeted instruction. I'll explain why in just a moment here. But before we do that, let's just talk about what targeted instruction is. Targeted instruction is now more of what this picture kind of shows here. Like whenever I think of targeted instruction, I think of small group time. This is where we meet students in small groups. This is where we meet students in small groups, I'll say it again. And then other students, what I was trying to say is they are working independently in the classroom. And the most effective small group instruction is going to happen when behavior management is be working on. Students that need extra support can be meeting in small groups. You could be supplementing the core classroom instruction. Whatever you taught in core, now you're taking it a little deeper. Maybe you have additional resources that can help with that. You're using those then. So you're focusing on that particular reading group's reading challenge. You know, what is this particular group struggling with? Are they struggling with fluency? Are they struggling with comprehension? Are they struggling with phonemic awareness? Whatever it might be, now all of a sudden you have this group of students together to really zero in and address those gaps. And then, like it says at the bottom there, it's typically delivered in small group. If you go back to this image, the actual triangle, you see that it's getting skinnier as you go up the top of the triangle. So what does that imply? It implies that if you can't do this for all kids, it might be okay. However, I've always been someone who believes that every student is entitled to targeted instruction as well. Sometimes the day just won't allow it. Sometimes you just can't get every single kid met in a small group. And to do every kid in small group every day is very, very challenging. But again, looking at it over the course of like a week or a unit, and then maybe even waiting it out a little bit. You know, maybe targeted instruction is for one particular group. Maybe they need to meet 4 out of the 5 days. And maybe another targeted instruction group might just need to meet with you 1 time over the 5 days, or however you want to do that, but waiting it out. I don't think it necessarily has to be the exact same number of times and minutes that every single group needs to meet with the teacher. I think there's some opportunities to balance that out a little bit, and see how kind of give kids exactly what they need. You know, maybe the more struggling kids are meeting with you more often, and kids that just maybe need a little shot of something from time to time meet with you when that is needed. That's really what flexible grouping is, I think, right? Is this idea that it's not stagnant. It's not every single kid meets at this time every single day, every single throughout the entire year. You might be meeting with kids on a different basis as needed. And then a phrase I've often used with targeted instruction is keep it simple and keep it connected. One of the things that when I was a younger teacher, I was teaching first grade, I don't know about you guys, but I got caught up in creating stations for students. And so I would be meeting with my small groups, and then I would have all these stations set up, a coloring station, a cutting station, a place where they can practice their handwriting, a glitter station. That just took about 1 year to less than that, probably a couple months to realize that was not a good idea. But trying to make these stations very meaningful, very fun, very engaging for students. And what I was doing, maybe if you're a station person and you know how to do this, hey, fantastic. I just was never that guy. I really struggled with it. So it says keep it simple, keep it connected. When I was trying to organize stations, I was not doing the simple part. I was keeping it complicated, keeping it connected. I was really spending more time planning these stations that had nothing to do with the scope and sequence, and had nothing to do with what I was teaching during core instruction. And I spent more time refilling supplies when I had to switch between groups. So kids would exit a group and head back to their seats, and I'm running around the classroom filling up straws, refilling paints, getting more crayons, sharpening pencils. Somehow I was able to do it, but it was very, very, very challenging. And sub plans, forget about it. It was like, oh my gosh, how do you even tell a sub how to do this? So quickly realized this is going to have to be something that's going to need to be a lot simpler. And when I made this shift to keep it simple, keep it connected, started seeing, well, my heart rate started to go down significantly, but I saw students actually getting more work done. I saw test scores starting to increase. So what do I mean by this keep it simple and keep it connected? Well, okay, let's look at it through two different sides here. On the left, we have small group instruction happening, and on the right we have independent practice, because that's what's happening. If you're going to meet with small groups, you have a bunch of other kids that need something to do, and that's why I was saying at the end of core, make sure you're giving them something to do independently, so that you can be uninterrupted in your small group. But this is kind of repeating some information I've already said. I'm on the left side of the slide. Small group instruction, meet with small groups each day, not necessarily every day, but you're meeting with small groups every day, but maybe not every single kid every day. Small group instruction should be based on your data sources from your school, and that your district collects or your school collects. In other words, you should be making data-driven solutions. I'll be doing another webinar on that at some point. That could be a whole conversation on how to plan your lessons based on data, but we can get into that at another time. But that's what we should be doing during small group instruction. And what are we using? Supplemental resources, things that we've learned along the way, that are great ways to teach these concepts. And then sometimes what I would even do under the heading of keeping it simple, I would just reteach and it kept it connected too. I would reteach the lesson. I would reteach it to the small group, and ask them what questions they had during core instruction, and then maybe have a Q&A about some of the things that we were doing during core instruction. Sometimes simply just reteaching it was incredibly effective. Meanwhile, over in the other area of the room where I used to have stations, this is the independent practice. This also needs to be simple and connected. Ideal conditions are established when all students can work independently, I think. Yeah, sure. If you can handle collaboration and students talking with each other while you're teaching the small groups, fine, totally great. I'm more of a person that kind of needs it relatively quiet in the classroom during small group instruction, so I focus on the independence. But sure, you can have kids working in small groups. You can have kids working in with partners. It's just your noise level tolerance. For me, it's very little. Maybe for you, it's a little bit better. But you have them work on that task that you introduced at the end of core instruction. Hopefully it's connected to what you were teaching during core instruction. You can simply have them have some independent level reading time, just making sure that the book is actually at their independent level, not necessarily at their instructional level. Independent level, the science of reading is telling us, is when kids can read 95% of the words or more without any help. Anything below 95 to say upper 80s, 88 to 94% accuracy is going to be more their instructional level, and anything below 88% is likely going to be at their frustrational level. You want to avoid that at all costs. and I would argue you would even want to avoid their instructional level during independent time, because this is not an instructional period of time for these kids. It is an independent time. So if you are going to do independent level reading, make sure it's a book they can actually read at a high level with a high level of accuracy. Online resources are great to use during this time. My school district, we're a heavy IXL using school district, so a lot of us are using IXL in this time. Lots of really great resources IXL offers. It's an online program that students can access. And then other independent activities that connects practice to skills that were taught during core instruction. I'm going to be doing webinars also on just core instruction and take a deep dive in core instruction. I'm going to take a deep dive into targeted instruction in another webinar, so we can get into some of the specific things that can be connected for students. And then, of course, at the very top, I'm just going to go back to that triangle for a moment here. At the very top, you have the intensive services. This is the tier 3 level. Not going to spend a ton of time on this because this is more about, well, this happens when core instruction didn't work for a kid, the targeted instruction didn't work, the targeted independent practice is not working. We need more. This is where IEPs come into play. This is where you might refer a student to like a student support team where you talk about interventions. This is where a reading specialist could kick in and pull the kid out for a little bit, not during core instruction, but other times. This is where special ed, like I said, gets involved, a math support person. I know we're not talking about math today, but all of the individuals that provide specialized instructional support, this is the top of the pyramid here. So we want to get those intensive services defined. Oftentimes it can be one-on-one or in small group. These are persistent reading difficulties, very individualized at this point, and just kids who just need some significant support with their instruction. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it is definitely part of the science of reading. Students are in these situations. Students are in these classroom environments when the data suggests and when that they need to be, and there's just a lack of evidence that students are achieving at the rates they need to be achieving at. So I mentioned some ideas here. So here are a couple of thoughts about how you could set this up. Now, most science of reading seminars you go to are going to be talking about 120 minutes of literacy. This is talking about 90 minutes of the time. There's still 30 minutes to go. But the core and the targeted will typically take you up to about 90 minutes. You still have about 30 minutes to teach in literacy. Sometimes that's the intense intervention that kids are receiving. That's going to be their final 30 minutes. For me and my district as a 5th grade teacher, what we do is we do the core, we do the targeted, and then for the final 30 minutes, we're teaching morphology. So Greek and Latin roots. We spend about 30 minutes a day working on that. And that's it's actually not connected to these 90 minutes. These 90 minutes that I'm showing you on this slide, these are uninterrupted, continuous 90 minutes. The 120 doesn't necessarily need to be continuous. It's great if it is. Well, sometimes it's great if it isn't because you're breaking up literacy a little bit for kids just to keep things sort of fresh as the day goes. But anyway, there's some possibilities for the 90 minutes. So the 30-60 model we have on the left here, this is where you have 30 minutes of core. This is that large group instruction, that core instruction. Excuse me. And then immediately following the 30 minutes of core, you go into 60 minutes of targeted. This is where you're meeting with small groups, using your supplemental resources, things we talked about on the previous slides. Then you end up maybe with 3 20-minute groups. Maybe it's 3 15-minute groups because you have to build in some transition time and whatnot. But basically 3 groups can be met during this time. And then, of course, you have kids working on their independent activities there as well. So let's say a kid is meeting with you in small group. So their day might look like, they have 30 minutes of core. Then they have you for a 15 to 20-minute group. And then they're going to have about a 40-minute time of independent time. So, 60 minutes of targeted time doesn't necessarily mean 60 minutes every day for every kid to do something independently. Well, they're going to have to be pulled in small group at some point. There you go. Now it's down to about 40 minutes. Sometimes those minutes don't work. So you can mess with it. You can call it the 50-40 model. Sometimes you need more time in core. And it's basically the same thing. And just you can play with these numbers a little bit. But if you did the 50-40 model, it's 50 minutes in large group core instruction. And then 40 minutes of the targeted time, maybe that's only time for 2 groups, but everything else kind of remains the same. Let's say that independent time can be tricky to get through 60 minutes in a peaceful way. Maybe the shorter targeted time is better. but maybe you mess around with, maybe it's a 20/80, maybe it's a, I don't know, 45/45, but whatever you do it, it's okay. You use your professional judgment there. These are the two that my team, we typically bounce around between, the 30/60 and the 50/40. But we're fifth grade teachers, so you know that's going to be different for many educators there. But just some ideas to structure your the time to get in core and targeted instruction. So that's the main content. This is an overview of a sensible way to teach the science of reading. We're going to take each component in this seminar and develop other webinars that take each of those a little bit more deeply. Like I mentioned earlier, very excited to get those out there for people to be viewing. But again, I'm Mike Savage at Instructional Concepts, and just a quick review, we do offer graduate level courses that are very similar to the content that we covered here today. You can pursue a master's degree with us. You can earn graduate credit with us. All of it is at self-paced. I mean, I'm always available. I'm happy to jump on a Google Meet and have follow-up questions with you, or a lot of people just call me or text me. A lot of my students do that. Certainly part of the program. These are all fully accredited graduate level courses any school district that I have been working with has not denied these courses. So they're widely accepted as you move up your steps and lanes, or you're pursuing that master's degree. We're going to be providing more CEU opportunities, free ones, over the course of the summer. The next one, if you're viewing this before July 8th, I'm not sure if you are, but if you are viewing it before July 8th, our next free one is going to be on July 8th at 11:30 a.m. Behavior management in the post-COVID classroom. Just things changed, right? Things really changed for those of us who were teaching before COVID and after COVID. Attention, students being able to stay focused on tasks, some socialization gaps that occurred because of how long some schools stayed closed. Just a lot to talk about there. So we're gonna have a seminar on behavior management in the post-COVID classroom. What are COVID, of course, is a very hot topic, still is today. But no matter what you believe, I think one thing is very, very true about it is things changed in the schools. There was a pre-COVID school and there's a post-COVID school, and this seminar is going to talk about how to navigate what we are dealing with in the post-COVID classroom. So, well, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully you found this webinar appropriate and sensible. And a good use of your time. And if you do need to contact me for your CEUs, feel free to email me at instructionalconcepts@gmail.com. Feel free to do that. And feel free to also check out our website at www.instructionalconcepts.net to view our full course offerings. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.